G'day everybody, where's Wally here? Well, I've just had a little look at my friend Level Earth Observer. Well, it seems that Leo got served quite nicely by Mr. Sensible, but he didn't take it very well.
Apparently I've been debunked. It would seem a globe jester is celebrating today, thinking that he's debunked me on one of my Horizon videos where I use an aeroplane. And of course the globe mathematics. I use both those things to highlight the absurdity of the globe.
I was going to do a quick debunk myself, but I thought Mr. Sensible did such a good job, I didn't bother. Leo still is seemingly making the same mistake. He doesn't even look at the actual angle. He just wants to keep presenting it as 2 times 39,000 feet. My goodness.
Now the globe jester is coming from the usual sophist angle, not addressing the fact the horizon should have dropped by 14 miles. Trying to look at it in degrees. Oh, it should have only dropped 3.5 degrees. It's minimal, you won't see it.
Tell me, Leo, what angle is 2 times 39,000 feet over 242 miles? Did you put that into a triangle calculator yet? Have you found out that's only 3.5 degrees?
To be expected. The usual tosh we get from the globe side. So rather than address all that nonsense, we'll just go higher and we'll smash the supposed debunk video and the globe will just destroy at the same time.
So Level Earth Observer, not being happy with being served once, he decided to double down by tripling up. So now he's gone and looked at Felix Baumgartner, and it's like 48 miles now. He thinks that the drop is going to be over 436 miles. That's fair enough, Leo. That's exactly what it is. Let's have a look at Walter Bislin. This is actually a much easier way for you, Leo. Just pop the 2 figures into Walter Bislin. You don't even need to do anything else. It tells you exactly everything you want to know and everything you actually need to know. So Walter Bislin tells you it's only 6 degrees this time.
Look out the window at the apparent eye level of the camera and you can see the horizon, okay?
So when we look at jumping out of the capsule there and you want to claim that that's pointing straight ahead, how do you know it's pointing straight ahead? And before you jump on me here saying, yes, I'm not saying that the capsule's hanging crooked at all. Just perhaps maybe the camera is pointing down slightly. It needs to be pointing down by 6 degrees. And if that capsule's 10 feet wide, which it clearly isn't, check this out, it's actually probably more like 6 feet wide. But at 10 feet wide, 6 degrees is about 1 foot, which is about the thickness of this guy's head. So that's about where the horizon actually is below eye level. Kind of easy, really, isn't it?
Biggest pantomime.
So while I was having a look around, I noticed that Leo had about 3 or 4 other videos that I hadn't seen yet. So I had a quick look at that, and this one caught my eye. Rockets in a vacuum can't generate thrust.
Problem with the idea with supersonic retropropulsion is instead of lighting those rockets
Chuck, give us a demonstration of a rocket working in a vacuum. I don't care if it's supersonic, whatever. Give us a demonstration of a rocket working in a vacuum so we can see propulsion work in a vacuum.
So now if your theory is correct, this would be like a hill climb. Starting off really easy with lots of air down low. As the rocket gets higher and higher, we would be noticing it would be struggling for traction should your theory be correct. And as we watch the birds of a feather, Rocket Lab's launch just from the other day, you can see that at 20 kilometres, the flame is not really that wide. There's still a fair bit of atmospheric pressure at this level. But as it gets higher and higher, you'll notice that not only is the exhaust plume getting wider and wider because there's less atmospheric pressure to constrain it, the speed of the rocket's actually getting faster and faster and faster. And once it's past max Q, the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure, the rocket really starts to crank up and gets even faster still. So by the time the first stage is kaput, it's already right near the Kármán line of 100 kilometres, and then second stage can take over. I know, modus tollens time. P, rockets require air to push against. Q, as air gets thinner, there would be less thrust because there's less air to push against. Oh, and look at this, we do not notice this at all. We see rockets go flying right straight out into the vacuum of space. Not Q, therefore not P. I am really loving these modus tollens. So while rockets do not actually push off the air, as in the atmosphere around them, because they can fly in a vacuum, they do kind of technically push off the air, as in the exhaust that they're throwing out the back. So maybe you're actually kind of right.
Biggest pantomime.
And finally I got on to LEO's latest offering, and he has a problem with vacuum and astronauts and space, it would seem.
And yet we're expected to believe people are in the vacuum of space, which is far, far worse than what our friend here is supposedly encountering in a minute. And they've got dexterity to fix things, do up bolts, change parts. Ridiculous. You want to convince me man can live and move around in a vacuum, do it under proper conditions. I want cans of Coke and Pepsi Cola cans all around the vacuum chamber, blowing up as our supposed spaceman in his proper space outfit comes up against conditions that he would face in the ISS while he's on his spacewalk. Yeah? Then I might believe the absurdity that is the heliocentric space claim, that men can move around, do things in a vacuum whilst being protected from a vacuum. Still waiting to see that proven under proper scientific conditions.
So he finishes up by saying he just wants someone to show him an astronaut working in space, or someone working in a vacuum, or that a person can survive in vacuum. Mate, you should have come to me in the first place. This is a video I did, well, probably a year or so ago, when the Russians had a problem with a hole being drilled through the Soyuz. So they bogged it up with epoxy, as of course we all would do, but then they wanted to check it from the outside. So the two cosmonauts went outside and they had all sorts of fun and games.
We've hit the 4-hour mark in today's spacewalk. Oleg Kononenko trying to gain the most favorable body orientation relative to the location where he is about to use a cutting tool to make a 10-inch incision and peel back a swath of thermal insulation.
So here at the 4-hour mark we see them struggling to get a tool to cut through the outer insulation. Turns out gravity is very, very helpful when you need something to push against. And they couldn't get the tool to bite into the surface because it seems like standing on a very long boom, every time he pushed the tip of the garden shears into the insulation, he went backwards. Who would have thought that could happen?
What is the objective of...
This is Mission Control Houston at the 4-hour, 10-minute mark in the EVA. You can see from Oleg Kononenko's helmet camera that area where he used a knife to initiate an incision into the thermal insulation, underneath which is a micrometeoroid orbital debris shield. He, however, has not had much luck getting the correct leverage with his feet and a foot restraint at the end of the Strela boom to be able to utilize a different set of cutters, so he's now back to the knife itself.
So after 10 minutes of all this pushing and toing and throwing, he decides to pull out the big knife. And I love how they say to initiate the incision. Notice how he's able to push the knife in because look what his left hand is doing. He's holding onto an attachment so he can push against that with the knife going the other way.
Oleg, be careful. Don't be so harsh on that.
Ooh, interesting. No gravity, but he can find a way. So all these difficulties just because there's very little gravity in space to help them push.
4 hours, 21 minutes into the spacewalk, a great view of Oleg Kononenko in the red stripes, having used a cutting tool to make an incision as he continues now to use a knife to cut away thermal insulation and try to get to the orbital meteoroid debris shield underneath that he hopes to be able to cut to expose the hull of the habitation module of the Soyuz for sample collection of any epoxy sealant that may have extruded during the repair of a hole on the inside of the habitation module back on August 29th.
Well, this is the best hacking in space you're going to see for a while. All ye doubters take note of how many bits and pieces of debris go off in all sorts of directions. But notice that once they are travelling, they remain constant. If they're spinning, they remain spinning. There's no sign of any gravity or air resistance either. Wow, look at all those angles and speeds and spins.
Biggest pantomime.
Well, they had to use the shears to cut aluminium micrometeor shield underneath the insulation, so that took a bit of cutting and hacking to get through that.
And don't forget about the sharp edges. That is our main concern. Just be careful. Like that. I think it's perfect.
Yeah.
No, nothing.
Sure.
Let's cut a little bit more. And please be careful with the cable here. Be careful with the cables. You can go through here, but please be careful with the cables.
But I also captured this action from one of the HD cams on the ISS in a different spot. It was a totally different stream, and I managed to grab these things, but just take a little note of that little bit of debris floating down the right-hand side of the frame. Another one was going left right across to the frame. Very interesting, isn't it? Interesting. So, Elio, get control of your ego. Let go of all these ideas and all the things that you think are proof, and just sit back and think about what you're seeing from space here. It's indeed in a vacuum, it's in a vacuum in space, it's in a vacuum in space in microgravity. Now there's all the things you're looking for, mate, so I hope you enjoy this.
The day the flat earth died. Bye bye, now there's no more that guy. Took away his Wally, then he ran off to cry. He tried to prove flat earth, but got a poke in the eye. Sobbing high, watched the flat earth die. I watched the flat earth just die. The day the flat earth died. Bye bye, now there's no more that guy. Took on Where's Wally, then he ran off to cry. Tried to prove a flat earth, but got a poke in the eye. Sobbing, I watched the flat earth die. I watched the flat earth just die.